Blackballed. Blackballed. What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is a technical disaster episode of Blackballed. Sorry for the late start. What is it, 10:28? Well, we in the Dean Blundell Podcast Network family like to start late, and we don't usually explain why, but we are having technical difficulties today. My guest isn't even here. He was here, and then the computer kicked him out. However, I have faith. Not the kind of faith that pertains to our next guest, but I still have faith. I watched Breaking Brethren, the documentary by Alex McIntosh, and I was kind of floored by it, to be honest with you. There was, I think, 3 or 4 families that were no longer in the Plymouth Brethren who were sharing their stories about what it's like. And make no mistake, this is a cult. I had world-renowned cult expert, Dr. Yanya Lalich, on, I believe it was last week, and she describes the Plymouth Brethren as the most dangerous Christian cult on the planet. And they have political connections in pretty much every Commonwealth country and a few other countries. They get sweetheart, sole source contracts. And so they are mixing it up with business and politics, but they are rooted in a very isolating, almost like a confinement type cult, where they feel like they are the chosen people. It has a long history of abuse and money laundering and things like that, and tax evasion. Sometimes they lose their tax exempt status. They lost it in the UK, for example, but then inexplicably they got it back. I think Canadians are having a hard time understanding the significance of this story for 2 main reasons. One reason is because the mainstream media won't touch it. There have been little stories where they mention the Plymouth Brethren sort of as an aside, but there hasn't been, like, you're not turning on, well, no one really turns on the National, but if you were going to watch the National, there would not be a story about the Plymouth Brethren on the National. And we, through not just the Klondike Papers, but through my interview, it was a powerful interview because of how brave and courageous she was with Cheryl Hope. I've been interviewing Richard Marsh as well for the last, I guess, 6 weeks or so. And through those 2 people, this story has grown, I guess I would say behind the scenes, because we haven't put any of it out yet. But for Cheryl's podcast, for example, it quickly topped all my podcasts. It beat all of them. And she has inspired, I think we're up to like 7 or 8 people to come forward and to share their stories of abuse with the police or with each other or whatever. And but people are coming out. Some of the details are strikingly similar. And these details, these are details that were not discussed on the podcast. These were details that were not discussed anywhere. And so there are some consistencies. And so what we are going to do is today, if we can get Dennis to link up here. Dennis, I'll tell you quickly why his role in that documentary, why his story sort of stayed with me. If you watch the documentary, he was the man who was basically just shunned from the church for no reason was given, and he was ostracized. He basically spent, I don't know how many years in his house where he could just like go to work, but he described it as like solitary confinement. Like it produced symptoms of PTSD. And there's one point in the documentary where he's trying to talk to his son. His son is still inside the Plymouth Brethren community. And it was the most heartbreaking thing I'd ever seen, because there's a dad ostracized from the church that he was brought up in, talking to his son who was born in this church. And you notice very quickly that the loyalties of the son are completely with the church. And that could be due to like fear, but the documentary gave us the idea that it was done through brainwashing. Basically, they indoctrinate you at a young age to place, the church and its leaders above your own parents, is basically the idea. And I related to that obviously because I think his son was 8, and my son is about to turn 8. I guess, maybe it just reminded me of my own kid. But I went through the creative visualization exercise of imagining what it would be like to be on the phone with my son, who would be like, I cannot see you. I am not going to see you. I don't want to see you. And how it would take every ounce of like strength I had to be like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? And Dennis didn't do that. And I learned from Richard Marsh that a lot of the people who are excommunicated from the church are very frightened to go to the press or the police or start talking amongst, other people in town who aren't members of the church, because the blowback inevitably falls on the family that they left behind. And so, like, how heartbreaking is that? Your flesh and blood is telling you basically, you've disrespected the church, and I won't have that. So sorry, Father, but I'm siding with the church. It must be one of the most terrible moments in that person's life. Yeah, his name is Dennis Wragge, and Dennis hopefully will be clicking back in any second. He was here a second ago, and now he's gone. And we are, we're going to be talking to a lot of ex-members of the Brethren over the next month or so. We have one next week, Carmen Dreeber. She is, I believe, the granddaughter of Symington, who was like the grand poobah of the Plymouth Brethren back in the day. And she's going to talk to us about like what it's like the politics that exist inside the church. She has original documents that are confidential documents that were only dispersed inside the actual cult. So we have access to those documents. And we're going to talk about one specific document that it's about priestly visits. And priestly visits it's basically when elders from the church come to your house and lecture you, basically, for doing something not churchy enough, I guess. And the invasiveness of it is strange. That it reminds me a lot of Scientology when they get audited. It's basically the same thing. You come to a person's house, you start asking questions, and you basically interrogate them and lecture them. And people who are on the shit list get these priestly visits a lot. And then if you're known for receiving a lot of priestly visits, then the gossip starts and people start like shunning you. It is a very unhealthy way to live. And there is a side of me that wants to take a page out of Cheryl Hope's book. And when she was on, I was completely floored at the idea that she views her alleged abuser as sick, as in like, unwell, not just like evil, but, sick. And the church itself, she doesn't want to see gone. She just wants to see reform. And at the time, I think I said after she had left, because I didn't really want to, I'm not going to challenge her on that. That's her opinion. She's obviously more than entitled to it. And her opinion means more than mine does on this. However, I was more of the variety of, I would support capital punishment for pedophiles, and let's burn that shit to the ground. Probably not a helpful thing to do if you're an actual ex-member. And this is why this church is really kind of tricky. When Dr. Lalich was on, again, she's recognized as the world's most renowned expert on cults. If some of you viewers recall, we were going to have her on one night, but she's walking her dog and was attacked by a wild turkey. And I wasn't mad at all, because how can you get mad at someone for getting attacked by a wild turkey? But her opinion on this church is that they're the most dangerous church on the planet, but also the manipulation and the post community relationship between the ostracized and the church itself is insane. It has a dimension of Scientology. It also has a little sprinkle of Mormonism, and then a ton of dominionism. And for those who might not recall what dominionism is, it's sort of like a radical offshoot of evangelicalism. And it's basically corporatizing your spiritual beliefs and then deflecting any and all responsibility when it comes to things like the environment to God, because they believe that their companies, their chemical companies and oil companies and whatever else, that God will protect the environment from their companies because they're dominionists, basically how it works. In other words, completely batshit stuff. And there is a conventional wisdom now that that maybe these organizations need to have their charitable status revoked, especially when they start blurring the lines between inflows of the church, which, by the way, from what I am told, it is a regular occurrence that none of that money that the regular families then kick up to leadership in Australia is really accounted. There is it's like hiding their corruption in plain sight. It's just as obvious as televangelism. Like Benny Hinn is clearly a charlatan. And I knew a guy whose mom sent him like 50 grand a month. Tying together, capitalism or whatever with spirituality is strange. There is a growing movement in Canada among ex-Brethren members to expose this organization now. And these are some of the relationships that Richard and I and Cheryl have forged since the Cheryl interview. And what we're attempting to do is two or three things. One of the first thing that we're trying to do is we are going to organize an actual protest where Cheryl is from, in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, in front of the church. I am going. There's a couple other people that are considering going. We'll wait and see what happens. But I'm going to broadcast from there. And the cool thing about it is that it doesn't matter if 5 people show up or 150 people show up, because the reason why the people are there, and we've been breaking story after story on the Dean Blundell site, and Press Progress has broken a couple stories. They're mentioned in stories that are otherwise about different issues, but little by little, it is trickling out. Now, why is that important? It's important because, and I think I discussed this the other day, I think with Ryan Lindley, that there is no brand attached to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. There's nothing to easily teach people about who they are and what they do and why it is significant and why it is damaging and why it is abusive and all those things. So we have a team that we put together. We have a couple lawyers. We have myself, Richard, Cheryl, and a couple other people sort of behind the scenes. And we are going to put our heads together. And what we are trying to do is sort of build a foundation for not just ex-members of the Brethren, but for any people who were in a situation where they were basically in a cult, held captive. I look at it as forcible confinement, whether they were born in it or not. They live in that gray area where the only thing that seems to protect them from being scrutinized is their belief in an omnipotent being. And, and by the way, guys, at this point, I'm not sure if my guest is coming back, so I may be wrapping up early today, and that's life. But if we start this organization, and there's a couple pretty high profile people that are considering being a part of it, and we encourage people who are abused by elders within the brethren to come forward, to do what Cheryl did, maybe to talk to the police, to file a police report. Again, not to sound like a broken record, because those of you who watch the show will remember me saying these things, but we wanted to do Cheryl's story, which to a lot of people on paper, especially, it kind of looks like a Me Too story. And I would say it is. Except we didn't want to, we discussed a lot with Cheryl before she did the show. And one of them was, we were throwing around ideas, and one of them was, do you want to remain anonymous? And it was someone else that asked that, actually. And before she could answer, I said, I won't do it, the podcast, if you're anonymous. And that isn't a slight on you at all. It's just that in order for a Me Too story, in my opinion, to be done most effectively, you would need, oh, you know what? He's calling through. Should we put him on speaker? Hey, Dennis, you can't seem to get your phone hooked up?
Hello, James.
Yeah, we're on air, buddy.
We are?
Well, I am.
Well,
Are you? Is your phone malfunctioning?
no, my phone is fine, but all I can see is myself. I can't hear anything from you. I can't.
I don't see you in there.
You don't see me?
No. So refresh your page and try to get in again.
Yeah, okay.
And if you can't get in, I will reschedule. Okay. So if it doesn't work in the next 5 minutes, we'll reschedule.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to shut this down and try again.
Okay. Thank you. He's a great guy. But technology is not a specialty. But he's trying his best, folks. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So the organization would be helping victims who escape cults, basically. Aside from that, I think now might be a good a time as any to announce that I have secured a second publishing deal with my publisher to write about the Plymouth Brethren, and I will be doing that starting next month. And without further ado, are you there, Dennis?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Don't touch anything. Stop touching stuff. You're good.
All right.
Thank you, man. Like, that was tumultuous. I didn't lose my temper at all, which is strange for me.
Well,
So-
congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I sort of went over who you were and where, and your story. And most of us that know of you know your story from Breaking Brethren. Not only a great documentary, but one of the best names for a documentary I think I've ever heard in my life. Like that, it explains everything. Because it must feel like you're high when you're in, like, in hindsight. I mean, when you remember the things that you had to do all the time. And I just want to, I have some stuff written down. I normally don't write things down, but I wanted to make sure that I got things right. What is shutting up, and how can a phrase that is seen in normal society as rude and bossy and all that kind of stuff is like a term for a process that people who are being disciplined have to go through at the behest of elders? Is that right?
That's correct. It's not shut up like you tell me to shut up, or like you say, it's rude. No, it's more just they decide that you should be confined, might be a better way to describe it, which means you have no contact with anybody. It's solitary confinement.
Right. And so just to give a little background, because I just watched it, so it's pretty fresh in my head. You were in the church with your family, and at one point, and you don't know the reason, I think still to this day, you were slowly being kind of pushed aside. You said that you noticed it when they noticed you not laughing that hard at their jokes.
That's right.
That sounds like mafia. Like, if you don't laugh at Uncle Vinny's jokes, you might not make it home, right? Like,
all right. Yes. To give a little of the background, I was born and brought up in the group, and at one time I was. I don't want to overstate it, but I think Cheryl Hope that described it as being the totem pole. You can be at the top or the bottom of the pole. I was rising up. I certainly wasn't at the top, but I was prominent enough in the group that they have an annual leaders meeting. In my day, it was in England, and there'd be somebody from every meeting would go to this annual meeting, and it was considered a huge honor to be invited. And I went for many years. I went to this leaders meeting, so I was a bit of a rising star, and I overstate that. But I was higher on the totem pole than halfway.
One of the things that I learned from that documentary is, and it's similar to Scientology, where money sort of buys you access to the next levels. Is that basically accurate?
Yes.
What is it about growing up in that organization that makes you not question anything when it comes to giving away your savings?
I would describe it as being like growing up in North Korea. You don't know what the rest of the world. You may be walking through it, but you don't have any contact, so you don't really understand. Plus, there's a tremendous amount of pride that as a group, we felt we were God's very special chosen people.
Did anyone from the Jewish faith like sue you for plagiarism?
No, they didn't. No.
I find okay, you know what I want to do first, and then because I kind of want to do it like an overarching. I want to ask a lot of questions about being a member of that community and everything, but
Sure.
because I told the audience when you were figuring out your tech that one of the main parts of the documentary that really struck a chord with me, and I think I said this to you off air, was when you were being ostracized near the beginning or whatever, and your family were still entrenched in the church. And the documentary played had a clip of you on the phone with your son, who I believe was he 8 at the time?
About that, yes.
And the exchange that you two had was heartbreaking. And the exchange was you telling him that you wanted to see him, and him very sternly putting his foot down and saying, "No, I don't want to see you." I'm paraphrasing, I think, and it was like that. And you got off, like, you had saved the message. And I find that really interesting. It's like a memento of the dark times or something, like you saved it. What did that feel like at the time, at the moment? I know it ends well, but I want you to unpack for me like what you're going through emotionally, because as a father of an 8-year-old son right now, my first reaction was, if my son ever did that, I would just drive there and just grab him by the ear and drag him home. But I can't do that in the Brethren for various reasons, especially whoever has your surname that's left behind is probably going to get punished for your actions, right?
Correct.
So when that happened and your son is saying those things to you on the phone, like, what's going through your mind? Because you're balancing emotion with strategy at that point, aren't you?
Very much so. What had happened? I have 2 younger boys. They had no one else to play with, so they had a lot of fun together. And at one point, Neil was. It was forbidden for Eric to go and see his mother and his brother, and I'd always promised Eric that when that came about, that I would then go to court and fight for him to have the right to see his siblings, and for Neil to come to our house. And there was a very vicious court case in which Neil was ordered to be brought to my house every second week, kind of a thing. And that's a background for that phone call. I was phoning up to make arrangements for him to come that day. But it never happened.
What were the visits like? Like, was he still maintaining that loyalty to the church?
Yes. And my his older brother would bring him and more or less police his actions. and be very stern that Neil could not eat with Eric or like his other brother and myself. He couldn't eat with us when he came to visit. And my older son was there to enforce the rules.
Wow. Like when I had Dr. Lalich on, and I was trying to get from her what is the sort of invisible power that these organizations have. One key one that the Brethren has is that you don't get tapped to be in the Brethren, you're born into it.
Correct.
That is like a cult on steroids as far as being able to indoctrinate, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a very vicious cult, and because I was higher in the totem pole, I've got many stories where I was involved with doing terrible things to other people. But it's just part of the culture. You're brought up in it, and that's what you think is normal.
I think it would be helpful, and part of our mission to sort of like spotlight this organization, if you would be willing to tell us what one or two of those horrible things were.
I don't mind. I would like to enlighten people that the rank and file of the Brethren don't know some of the evil that goes on at the top.
Okay, let's do it. Go ahead.
Well, I'll give you one story that is still haunts me to this day. There was a young fellow out Western Canada, and involved in a car accident where his wife was killed. He had married an Australian girl in the group, and while he was struggling with his grief and trying to get his feet back in the ground after the accident, the grandparents from Australia came and took his two young children to Australia to care for them temporarily. While the two boys were in Australia, the grandparents were kicked out of the meeting, and the young man remarried a girl in Canada, and he went to Australia to get his boys back, and the Brethren virtually kidnapped the boys because now the grandparents were out of the group. Somebody else had the boys. He got a court order in Canada that he should have custody of the boys, but the Brethren in Australia would not honor the Canadian judgment. So he had to then start proceedings legally in Australia, where the group did all they could to frustrate his efforts to get his boys returned. And I got a phone call from Sydney, Australia, asking me to do surveillance on this young man in Canada and his new in-laws. And I spent quite a bit of time doing the surveillance on him. And I reported back to Sydney, Australia, and then they asked me to do something that was illegal, and I refused to do it. So
what did they ask you to do?
They asked me to get credit reports on him. I was in the financial business, so it was possible to do that, but you cannot get financial information about a person without their consent. Mm-hmm. Of course, I didn't have the consent, so I wasn't going to break the law and get without.
And so you refused to do that?
Yes, I refused to do it.
Is that when things started to get a little bit uncomfortable? And how long before you were turfed did that situation happen?
I was still, I was still held in honor at that point, but I would think things started declining after that. I felt so badly about what I had done to this young man, because they just ran him bankrupt virtually, which is the way they win court cases.
How
And,
does the Brethren in Australia have any authority to refuse a court order? And why would it even go to them and not to, why wouldn't the Canadians start originally with the Australian government? Hey, this organization has kidnapped 2 boys. Can you get on this?
well, James, that'd be a huge process to try and get the Canadian government involved in
Anything?
what's considered a family dispute, is the way the Brethren would describe it. And
Did they have permission to take did the grandparents have permission to take the kids to begin with?
I don't know the details, but yes, I'm sure
Okay.
they did. I mean, the young man in Canada was, I would think he was at his wit's end, caring for 2 rambunctious boys, having lost his wife. It'd be pretty tough.
Like if that story happened today and the Plymouth Brethren was like Chuck E. Cheese, right?
Who?
Chuck E. Cheese, like a kid's restaurant chain, you know?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I don't imagine that the Canadian government would send something to Chuck E. Cheese headquarters in Australia and just be like, you know, can you give us the boys? Like it would be a story, and the story would be as follows. Grandparents take kids to Australia. Radical cult takes boys. Australian government not doing anything to get the boys back. It's so open and shut. Listen, I if you have religious beliefs still, I salute that. I don't find any of that like you know, important or offensive or anything. But I'm just wondering what it is about, and I'm going to trail off a little for a second. And why is it the trump card that you get when you want to do things that are completely unfair, or if you want to be tax exempt, is believing in an omnipotent being? The one thing that you can never prove is real is the one thing that you need in order to get protected. And when I hear about stories like that, my mind starts to speculate about political connections with the Brethren. We have been talking really like preliminary stuff here in Canada, but as someone who was involved with the church, you know that is their MO, isn't it? Wherever they go, what they try to do is get the business wing of the organization profitable and then secure government contracts by lobbying and you know, pressing and forging relationships with government officials. Is that basically it?
That's true. And I'm still very much a believer, and I believe in God, but I also believe there's a devil out there. And I think the rank and file of the Brethren, ordinary people, they don't know what goes on at the top, but I say it's controlled by the devil.
Like the actual devil.
The actual devil. Yes.
Yeah, that's Hales, right?
Yes, I will. Well, I'm not putting a name to it. I think it's systematic error, and I think the rank and file would. I will be vilified for giving this interview with you.
Oh,
but,
great!
I would.
No, you didn't have to be a member of the church to get vilified for doing an interview with me. So you're in good company.
All right, but my whole point is to hopefully 1 or 2 will see this podcast and we'll just start to question. I've got tons of written documentation and tape recordings that will show that it's totally evil. And
really,
you don't have to be a spiritual person to follow it. It's just plain corrupt.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if me not being a believer makes me more likely to criticize this group, because I have never thought once, what if I offend their belief in Jesus? Like I have never even had that thought before, because I don't think that what this organization is represents anything what Jesus represented, right?
No, it's not.
So it's difficult for me to like even care that it's a religion. I don't, you know. But okay, you know what? I want to give the floor to you then, because it sounds like you I think that's a great sort of mission. You know, if this podcast lands on the ears of anybody who's still in, maybe they'll think twice and maybe they'll want to try to find a way out. But what kind of things? What would you say to them? Like what kind of things would you reveal to them that, because they're so insular, that they have no idea is true, that would probably blow their mind? Like, is there a bunch of little examples like that?
Number one, I would like to emphasize what an abundant life I have today since getting out. But I'm also party to, for example, you've talked about the lawyer called Chapur.
Yeah.
I believe he's in Calgary. I'm in Toronto, but I was helping a young man who lost all his children. And I guess I don't know what happened, but somehow documentations from his office came from Calgary down east. I call it, there's a whistleblower in his office, saw the terrible things that the brethren were scheming, and
Yep.
they just sent these papers. Now, I'm sure there's a gag order, but I received these papers within half an hour of them being sent from Calgary down east.
Are you
So
talking about
I've
the
got
Klondike papers?
No. These are just internal memos and
Oh, okay.
recordings of meetings that Chapur had referencing. I was talking with Sydney today, and by Sydney he means talking to Australia.
Yeah.
The rank and file of the brethren don't know some of the evil things that are being done in the name of Christianity, and I'm very free to say it's not Christianity at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not a wholesome sect of Christianity. That's for sure.
What's not?
Yeah. But the hierarchies, the hierarchy and the way that they sort of siphon money from the flock is very Scientology. And I feel like Scientology must have gotten it from Plymouth Brethren, because Plymouth Brethren predates Scientology, right?
Yes.
And I think and Britain was like a very it's always been a place where a lot of brethren are, right? And so there were people at the time when L. Ron Hubbard was writing Dianetics, he was living in England, so there was like there were actually, proximity wise, two of the craziest cults in the country were like I think it was like 12 blocks apart at one point for like 3 years. What is the way you think that they can fall? I was talking again to a couple people on another podcast about how Western civilization and their, I think, an overextension, over accommodation to freedom of religion. And what I mean by that is religion is used as a shield from scrutiny more than it's used as a dove of peace or whatever the fuck. And it seems to me that there needs to be a law in the books about this type of confinement. Like, we know emotional abuse exists, right? And and mental abuse. I don't understand why indoctrination and confinement and all that kind of stuff, why isn't there no law in the books that's like specifically kind of covers cult-like manipulation? And so I'm thinking that the business side of the church is the thing that's maybe is used as the mechanism to sort of bring them down. Like in the UK, when they got in a scandal and they had their tax exempt status taken away and then inexplicably given back to them 3 years later. They always win.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why is that?
The fact is, the rank and file people are told that they always win. In actual fact, since I've been out, I found out that there's many court cases that they've lost. And the only ones they win are where they use what's called the slap lawsuit, if you're familiar with that term.
Well, they can't do that here anymore. We have good legislation here now to block that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do, but it's like any law, there's loopholes. And it's basically where they just use enormous amounts of money to bankrupt the other side. Yeah. And to get back to your thing about Scientology, there was one of the former leaders that I always respected highly, and he had a lot of sayings that I've remembered. And one they used to talk about was, the devil only has so many tricks in his tool bag. And I see the same thing being happening in all these different cults. It's pretty much all the same, whether it's the Latter-day, the Warren Jeffs in
Yeah.
the West, or Scientology, or the exclusive brethren. They're all the same. Like, it's, when you talk about religion, I think of the devil. And that's why I say, I think the devil only has a few tricks in his toolbox. And this is,
Well, he was really busy being president of the United States for 4 years. So
okay, that's politics. That's
yeah,
another
I know.
subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if the devil's going to reside anywhere, it's probably in politics. That's what I would say, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you. Although I
Um,
tend to be probably more right wing than you are.
Oh,
It's
I
in
don't
my
know about
DNA.
that,
All right.
but I don't want to ruin the interview by one of us saying something accidentally bigoted. So we might as well leave that on the shelf.
Yeah, we
Um,
can try and be friends.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think for sure. Listen, I'm, and by the way, I say this almost to everyone that I know is a believer and who knows that I'm not a believer, that I don't have a beef with anybody at all for their beliefs. If we actually wanted to have a conversation to unpack the Bible, it might turn into quite a spirited debate. But there are certain aspects in life where I'm envious of people who believe in God.
Yeah.
The easiest example I can think of is grieving. I can
Uh-huh.
think of a better mechanism to feel okay than the true belief that they're in a better place.
Yes.
Like, if I could harness that to heal myself when I'm in mourning, I get that. It's almost worth the price of admission. It's just that I wouldn't believe that all the things that I'm supposed to believe, right? So, but I am envious. So, and that's a maturity thing for me, because I was a militant atheist. I'm still pretty hardcore atheist, but at least I can recognize that kind of stuff. So, and the reason why I'm even mentioning this is because I know that faith is a binding force in or outside of a group like this, and ironically, maybe faith is the type of common bond between ex-members and current members that can help them escape.
That could be. People who have escaped are, if for every person who's escaped, there's a different reason. But generally, people who have escaped either of their own doings or been kicked out, I would say 98% are very, very happy for what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to all these documents I have, if there's anybody in the group that want to see the documentation I've got, they're free to contact me from anywhere. And I would do all I could to just share the facts.
I would like to talk to you about that, because listen, we're a podcast. We're growing like crazy, but we're not the biggest medium in the world. I'm pretty sure that on a regular basis, I'm the only guy covering this stuff. So you don't really have a choice, Dennis. You have to give those documents to me. I'm sorry. No, but I would love to see them, because that's the interesting stuff. What I've been looking for, because I don't know if you were listening or not, but I've secured a book deal to write about the Brethren.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and like a full scope book, where we go to Australia, the UK, like we're going to basically talk about all of the scandals and all of the craziness in all of the countries that the Brethren is represented. We are utilizing Richard's story and Cheryl's story, and you're on the list, the preliminary list of all the people that I need to interview in Canada. So you don't really you have to give me those papers. I'll send someone over. Because the Gerald Shapur thing, all kidding aside, is the connecting tissue between politics and that group. And because he's a good lawyer, he comes with a built-in firewall, where as soon as it goes from politics and passes through the membrane of Gerald Shapur, it's almost something that you could never look at again because of attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, he's the right guy to focus on. What kind of stuff does he say? Like, what is Is this the David Wallace stuff, or what is on these calls?
No. This is long before David Wallace was in the picture, as far as I know.
Okay.
No, this would. I was surprised. I had a phone call a week or two ago from another reporter from Press Progress or Progress Press.
Yep. Press Progress.
And I kind of embarrassed myself in a way, but she read me. I didn't know she said, the brethren say thus and thus and thus and thus. We have no political agenda. We have nothing to do with politics. And, it was just, she said, what's your comment about that? And it just came out of my mouth. I said, that's just bullshit. And
Dennis.
because it is so lying, it is so untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the rank and file they have no access to what the truth is. And they're told that, as I said before, you're inbred with how special you are, and they're not told what the truth is. And by truth, I just mean black and white. It's there. And I've got some of these documents. Some of it would not stand up in court. It would be hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're all about hearsay on this podcast. No,
okay.
Well, listen, you know what it actually is? I don't consider, I feel like I don't have to play by the print journalism rules, because I'm interviewing you. Any second now, you could say something completely unprovable and crazy. And I'm just like, wow, that's interesting. When you publish a story in a newspaper or on a site, like a recognized media outlet, you are endorsing the content within the article. It basically comes, the publication, the publishing of the report is the endorsement. Whereas I'm like Barbara Walters, if Barbara Walters interviews a tyrant from the Middle East or something, and he says that George Bush is the devil and he smells like sulfur, it's not Barbara Walters that's going to get in trouble. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because this medium, the podcast medium, is great for stories like that, where you're kind of you're swimming in circumstantial evidence, right? You're covering he said, she said stuff. But I'm not hamstrung by, and it's not like a journalistic standard. No. I'm not hamstrung by the kind of ineptness, the laziness that the mainstream media seems to have these days, both because their budgets are cut and because is there even a person covering religious cults as a beat? And then when they find out who the political connections are, lawyers start calling lawyers. And so some editor might have wanted to do something at CTV, and all of a sudden the CTV lawyer calls them and says, yeah, you can't do this. And it turns out it's because that lawyer works at a firm who once went to college with Gerald Shapur. It's that kind of thing. Or even just Gerald's reputation is enough to cause fear in people.
So wait, I think if I'm reading between the lines, if anybody's going to get their butt in a ringer, it's going to be me, not you.
Well, I don't know about that, because this is an interesting piece of information. After I started covering the Gerald Shapur stuff with Nathan Jacobson and David Wallace, and the alleged threat and the alleged request for kidnapping and all that stuff, I found out 2 days later that I live in Gerald Shapur's hometown, and his entire family tree live 2 miles that way. So they might, just for convenience, they're not going to want to drive all the way down to Toronto to send a message. They'll probably just drive up the road and take care of me. So don't worry about it. I got your back, Dennis. It's going to be
okay.
fun.
All right. Well, I'll tell you an interesting one. The first time I heard the name Gerald Shapur was there was a previous website set up by a fellow working out of a little place in the backwoods of Vermont. And it was it started out as just being a website where people who used to be in the Brethren were able to contact their friends and family. And it was just a very nice little group. And it got very big, and it started, people started publishing things that were not complimentary to the Brethren. And
Right.
so the Brethren hired a very, very prominent law firm in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Their head office was on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is just down the street from the White House.
Oh, wow.
And these lawyers would go up to backwoods of Vermont and, try to chase down Tim. His name was Tim. And anyway, Gerald Shapur was involved in that.
Wow.
And I spent some time with Tim at in the backwoods of Vermont, and Tim told me stories, and I'll go out on the limb and just one of them, the Brethren hired an investigator, a lady investigator from Texas, to try and frustrate Tim. And I'm not accusing Shapur, and I want to make it plain. I don't know his extent of involvement, but
My lawyer just said thank you.
Beg pardon?
My lawyer just said thank you. Anytime you want to throw the word allegedly in front of all this, you're fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, it was very similar to this fellow in Canada. The lady investigator got so upset with the nastiness of what she was being asked to do that she changed sides. She developed cancer, and she confessed it all to Tim, who was running the website. And apparently she had been asked to hire people to do the ultimate sleaziness against Tim.
Vote Republican? I'm just
Huh?
kidding.
No, I think they're all Democrats.
Are you talking about like taking care of him?
No, not that bad. But
Okay.
they
Weaponizing Me Too accusations?
No, I'll tell you what it was.
Okay.
They wanted her to go and seduce or find someone else that would seduce Tim, and they could expose him for being a corrupt person because he
that's an old that's the Russians perfected that. That's a honeypot scheme.
Yeah, the honeypot idea.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not accusing Shapur of coming up with that idea, but somebody somewhere instructed this woman to do this. Yeah. She didn't do it, of course. And
that's a favorite of theirs, though. I've heard.
Okay.
Rumors tell me that that's a favorite of theirs. That tactic.
Yeah, like, and this is the rank and file brethren. They need to know this because that's where their money is going to in doing all these lawsuits. It's wicked.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but other than God and the Hales, I guess, the fabric of that community is family, right? Like you guys have, I mean, there's only a certain amount of families that exist in each community, and there's almost like a caste system. And and these people are destroying families, right? Like an accusation like that can destroy a family. I'm wondering if brethren were ever informed about this stuff, and they felt like leadership was trying to damage the very fabric of the community by destroying families. I wonder if that's the kind of thing that would work, or if they would just be like, our leader is good and you're full of wickedness. Like, I don't know, what the answer would be.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure there's many in the group that their conscience is bothering them when they see terrible things being done to other people in the group. But the cost of leaving is tremendous. Yeah. The cost of leaving is a bigger price than most people are willing to pay.
Yeah. I think we're going to cut it there, but I would love to have you back because, again, we're just starting covering this. We've been covering it for about 5 weeks. I'm just not going to stop. Every time I get a new story, I'm definitely going to put it up. I have no editor to answer to. I have a lawyer that makes sure that I'm not like burning down the building and pissing people off. But I want you to look at me as a person who will report on the things that that you're able to provide, or someone else from the Brethren. I'm that guy. I didn't seek out this role, but it just sort of happened because of the interview with Cheryl Hope. So I joke a bit, but I just do that to keep you at ease and to let you know that not all atheists are horrible. Right?
I never thought that.
Good.
No.
And you seem very charming. Before we go, the last thing I just wanted to do is we started telling the story about your son and how he was like refusing and he was siding with the church. Bring us to the ending of that saga, so people can walk away from this interview with something nice.
Well, when Neil was 12 years old, I'd actually been at church, and I went out afterwards with friends, and I came home around 11 o'clock at night, and this kid jumped out of the bushes and scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was shell shocked. He wanted to stay overnight, and then he wanted to stay another night and another night and another night. He's never gone back.
How old is he now?
He's now 40 something.
Right.
And he had a tough time. Very, very angry young man. Angry at me. Very angry. He used to just tell me how much he hated me, but he still stuck with me. And we are the best of friends now. And I'm so proud of Neil. He's come through some huge struggles in life. I think I mentioned on the documentary that he had his leg amputated.
Yes.
When he was on his 18th birthday. And he's been through some real struggles in his life, but anybody would say he's a fine man today.
Good.
And
listen, you come off as a man, and I'm gonna just make I'm gonna speculate here, but you come off as a person where my gut is like you're humble. I think you seem thankful and especially for where you are in life now versus back then. When I watched the documentary about that story, I got to tell you, buddy, like you're a good father.
Oh, well,
I mean that. And it's plain as day. Like you fought to have your son back and you succeeded. That to me is heroic. Like it wasn't your fault that you were born into this organization. So, but the fact that you were born into it where you were kind of higher up, and then when you got shunned, you were able to like, have the patience to, it probably required a ridiculous amount of patience, and then saw it through and was able to secure your son back. That's dad of the year shit for me, you know?
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I look at myself, I'm just an ordinary dad that loves my boys.
Yeah.
And I've got 3 kids that I love equally, but they'll have nothing to do with me.
Well, listen, I don't know. That's heartbreaking because they're missing out on someone who clearly has love for his family. And yeah.
Well,
if I don't like doing this because I just thought of it now. So if it comes off as like ridiculous and Americanized, then just let me know. But if you did have a chance to speak with them, what would you say? Like really, like, would you say anything? Because the strategy I hear is you don't really want to contact them because then the blowback will fall on them.
Yeah, that's true. And they've been inculcated from the time of their birth, really, that if you love your dad, that I think Cheryl Hope said the same thing. We're talking about her relationship with her father, that if you love your dad, then you'll act this way towards him. It is almost an unspoken thing that's put into children.
Yeah.
And I believe I saw the interview with Cheryl, which if she's watching this, I just so admire her for the courage of being so open about what happened with her.
Yeah.
And I think she did say something effective. She carried on with things because she loved her dad.
Yeah.
And put up with terrible crap. I can't imagine.
Otherworldly evil. Yeah. Just awful.
The evil of it. And my kids, I don't hold a grudge against them at all.
They're victims.
Huh?
They're victims. Yeah.
Correct. That's the exact word. They're victims, and they're bound up, and in my language, I say they're bound up by Satan.
Yeah.
You can put your own spin on that.
Oh, that would be Rush Limbaugh or something.
Okay.
I don't know. I couldn't think of a devil that you would know at the same time. So it was so I chose that. We're definitely going to have you back. I hope one day you get to be reunited with your other children, because obviously, you love them to death, and I think you deserve to have your family back. So it was a pleasure getting to know you. And I will give you a call and force you to give me those documents sometime in the next couple of days. No, I'll just charm you instead. But we will talk. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
All right, fine. It's been really a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that.
Somewhere.
Thank you, man. Have a good weekend, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Dennis Wragge. I love it when podcasts start late because technology is an asshole, and then the interview reveals a man who is clearly a nice gentleman who just wants to be a dad to his grown-up kids. I did not expect that. I expected the interview to be cut short because of more tech issues. So big ups to ThinkPads and routers and whatever else that we're supposed to credit. And yeah, I'm going to continue to cover Plymouth Brethren Christian Church stuff over the next week. Carmen Dreeber is going to be a guest on Thursday, and her name is really significant if you're an actual member of the church, because she's in the bloodline of one of the guys who, by the way, spoke directly to God. Isn't that great? Just that guy. And so that's next Thursday. And I'll leave it there. Tonight, Rob Kaviclian he's a criminal defense attorney. He's going to join me for a first installment of a new show on Blackballed called Heinous Cases. And the first episode is going to be about Carla Homolka. But rather than rehash the brutal details of her crime, I'm sure we'll do that in a little bit. We are going to talk a lot about the deal that she was given by prosecutors, which didn't have enough teeth. And then when new evidence came out after she was already given the deal, the government or the prosecutor, they did have a pretty clear case where they could have killed the deal, because the evidence showed that she lied about the extent of her involvement. And they didn't, because as they put it at the time, they didn't want to dissuade future testimony by others. And that just seemed like a really ridiculous reason. And in fact, Christy Blatchford, in her last book before she passed away, has a whole chapter on the Carla Homolka case and why it was a travesty of justice. So tune in tonight at 7 for myself and Rob Kaviclian for that. And otherwise, thank you, everybody. Straight up, guys, in the comments, I don't have my contacts in. And usually when I look over there, I either see one of two things: a reference to food or Mad Flour. So I just let you guys do your thing. And but thank you guys. You guys are basically you're my base. You're my pro-life faction. Probably none of you are pro-life. So yeah, we'll see you tonight at 7, everybody, and thanks again.
Blackballed. Blackballed.